Then there was a war, it became Hungary, and then became Czechoslovakia again. That's just a little aside how crazy it was back there in Europe. And her parents were told, as no one was believing, that there was actually going to be laws that said you can't go to school anymore if you're Jewish, you can't have a business, and that was hard enough to believe. But when they came knocking at their door and said, you have to go to the ghetto, which you probably know all about the ghetto. It's not the ghetto of New York. It's a ghetto where you had no choices, and you had to go and you had to follow. And so they were put in a place with thousands of people, like on one square block, where they had to share any little bit of food. And it's interesting, and you'll hear a lot of stories as you're reading and writing, but I could just tell you from my own mom that a lot of people did take a chance and throw food over the walls into the ghetto, risking their lives, because if you assisted any Jewish people, you could be put in a camp yourself. And a lot of people did try to help, and a lot of kids that were in the ghetto tried to sneak out and get food, and they succeeded. So there's some good stories about that. But again, getting back to my family, my mom was taken with her parents, and they were there for at least a month, where, like I say, there was hardly any food. And then one day the Nazis came and said, well, good news, you're going to a better place, Auschwitz. And I think everyone in this room probably heard about Auschwitz, and my mom was taken there with her parents, where her dad was immediately separated and never seen again. And her mom, as my mom tells it, she was holding on to her mom's hand, and the guards just said no and separated them. That was the last time she saw her mom. So it's kind of a hard thing to live with. Growing up, I remember my mom crying a lot, stirring the soup or whatever we were eating, and I would ask what was wrong, and she would just say nothing, or the war. You find when you meet any survivors, or even children of survivors, they really didn't like to talk about it. It's so horrible, it's hard to believe, but also there's some shame involved, as if they let it happen, which of course nobody would let that happen. So as I was saying, I was telling your teachers that I usually had my mom with me when I came to the schools, but since she made, and she's in Phoenix, Arizona, like I said, just a couple of little tapes, and one of them we have today where she'll tell the story and then I can fulfill you, and it's not very long. I think it's about 6 or 7 minutes. And as for my dad, I don't have a tape from him. The Steven Spielberg movie crew, before they made Schindler's List, did go to their house and to all the survivors. They were not picked for the movie, but they did make the tapes, which should be available again on that Holocaust Museum site. The tapes are at the museum. My family's story is at the museum. I got to go to the museum. I'm thinking it was about 5 years already that my daughter was in the 7th grade, and I got to chaperone that trip, and that was quite a remarkable museum, which I'm sure most of you had some thoughts about after you left there. And the most important thing, and I'm sure you've heard it, is why do we remember that? Why do we talk about that? So it should never happen again. That even though you may think that you don't have a lot of power as one individual, you do, and especially when all the individuals together. And of course we're seeing that now even with gun control. It's not quite the same as people being murdered, though. Yes, we had the students murdered, but we're talking, like I say, 11 million. I read a statistic that if we had a moment of silence for all the people killed in the Holocaust, it would take about 11 and a half years to read all the names or to have a moment of silence for all those people. That's pretty incredible. And here's the interview with my mom.